Most of my family and friends could not believe it. They thought that we were on lockdown. Everyone assumed that we could not leave the house at all. And I said, that's totally wrong. The government did recommend that we stay home as much as possible and only go out for, necessary things. But, you would see people out and about. Many of my friends were just shocked by that.
A big divide, it seems like, in the States. Like, a lot of people are like, stay home, stay home, stay home. And then on the other hand...
Yeah, so there has been a lot of protests. There was a pretty intense one the other day where people were going into the Capitol building with guns because you're legally allowed to bring rifles.
I think it's really awesome that Korea was able to let us all keep our freedoms, to a certain extent and still contain the virus. I personally was quite nervous. Literally the first week or two, I did not go out at all. I ordered everything delivery. I was like, I'm not stepping outside. My face did not see the sun.
It kind of got somewhat scary, but I think in the beginning it was like, what is this? You're trying to figure out, like, should I be scared? Should I go home to Norway? And I just started like hoarding food.
Yeah. The virus really scared me at the very first because when we had to go to school and then we realized that we have to wear masks and for the interview test we have to be far from the teacher and something like that. Oh, is this going to be so serious?
It's interesting because I remember February or something. And looking back now, it's almost funny in a way because that was when we had 30 cases and we were so paranoid and so cautious. I was quite scared, and I remember thinking that my family was gonna freak out and be so worried about me. And I called them and they were not that worried. And I was like, you guys, there's a lot of cases here, it's getting serious. And they were like, yeah, I heard it's like the flu. And I think it's one of those things that just wasn't talked about much because it was on the other side of the world, right? So I think that a lot of my family and friends back home just didn't know what was heading their way. But then it got bad in America when things were getting better here. And it was really strange for me because people were going out and about more in Korea, but then everything at home, on my timeline for every social media thing was like, stay home, do not go outside. And it just caused a weird conflict in my mind because I would be going to a cafe and then I would read everyone stay home, stay home, stay home. And then I would get paranoid again and I would say, should I stay home? I know I'm far away from that, but it was just really strange to deal with.
I think it's just a strange situation in general. So nobody in the beginning was worried. When I was texting my friends, they were like, what? they just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And you keep hearing different stuff when you're reading online because the Western countries will say one thing and then the Asian countries will say another thing. Norway and the European region, wearing face masks and stuff like that, it's not normal. If you go to a regular store, you won't be able to buy face masks. It's just not a thing. So I just remember reading face mask doesn't work at all. It's just a waste of time and money. And I think after seeing when it suddenly got really bad in Europe, and then seeing the progress that are made in Asia and in Korea, where it just stabilized extremely fast. And then I hear them say maybe face masks are working a little bit better than we thought and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate
So
on different
it's hard to know what you should do. I know in Korea we get a lot of notifications from the government saying and keep reminding you on what you should do, practice good hygiene. And I think it was handled pretty good from the beginning. As soon as it started, in school we had to wear a face mask and then practice good hygiene, we got hand sanitizers and everything.
Yeah.
And I think probably that helped a lot, that the government was so hands-on from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think Thailand, they didn't really pay that much attention. It's not like in here, in Korea. If you are related to the people who got the virus, they would drag you to the hospital and then they will have you check. But in Thailand, it's not like that. Maybe because of the lacking of the staff and like all of the tools, the equipment. If you really have those symptoms, you can get your health check. But if not, they don't really do it for you. So I think it's bad because the virus can hide itself.
Yeah, you can have no symptoms.
It doesn't show at all. So I really understand why they don't do that, but it's still scary.
Yeah, definitely.
I think in the beginning, at least in Norway, you could call a hotline and you could like drive to get tested. But I think they realized very fast that they can't do that. Within a couple of days, they were just told that most likely you won't be able to get tested unless you have like, there's specific symptoms you need to have. So I think, at least in Norway and probably many other countries as well, if you get sick, you just have to stay at home and let it go its way.
I think that's pretty similar in the States as well. I know there has been an outcry because there is just not enough tests available. And so people who are experiencing symptoms and probably definitely have it can't get their hands on a test. So that's a big problem in the States. And that's another thing that I saw was a big difference here was, I know Korea has been testing like crazy. You know, we went through so many tests. And then I read recently that when, travelers come to Korea, if they're from Europe, it's a mandatory test, right? Like everyone gets a mandatory test. So I was really surprised by that because I thought, wow, in America, there are people who are clearly showing the symptoms and they cannot get the test. But here in Korea, people who maybe aren't even showing symptoms must get the test or are required to take the test. So that was like a big difference.
After cases in Norway started going up a little bit, they decided to close down the border. So if you were from another nationality than Norwegian, you would just be sent back again. And they started doing like quarantine measures and closing down.
For me, one of the things that was like really interesting was just the fact that Korea never really closed the borders and also that there was never really like a strict lockdown. And most of my family and friends could not believe it. They thought that we were on lockdown. Everyone assumed that we could not leave the house at all. And I said, that's totally wrong. The government did recommend that we stay home as much as possible and only go out for, necessary things. But, you would see people out and about. Many of my friends were just shocked by that. And I was shocked by that. And it's funny how my opinion kind of changed of that because I had friends in Vietnam and friends in Taiwan, and talking to them and hearing their experiences as well, they had, I think Vietnam specifically shut their borders right away. And one of my friends was on lockdown since, I don't know, even February. And at first I was almost like, why isn't this happening in Korea? Like, why are we not closing the borders? Why are we not doing this? And then it just worked. However they handled it here worked. So it's just kind of funny looking back now how that really changed, because at first I was like almost frustrated, like lockdown, come on, we need to control, like I know what I'm talking about. So now it's totally opposite. I think it's really awesome that Korea was able to let us all keep our freedoms, to a certain extent and still contain the virus. For me, it's hard to be away from home right now, going through these hard times and constantly worrying about my family and friends at home. It's hard being away because, nothing would, improve if I went home. I would just be putting myself at risk, and I know my family wouldn't want that, but it's also just very strange, seeing them going through what they're going through.
Lately about the protests going on in Michigan, a big divide it seems like in the States. A lot of people are stay home, stay home, stay home, and then on the other hand going against our rights and our freedoms. And so is it really like that? What's happening there?
Yeah, so there has been a lot of protests. There was a pretty intense one the other day where people were going into the Capitol building with guns because you're legally allowed to bring a rifle in the open, like as long as it's not concealed, you can bring it into government buildings. So it's a lot. The thing that scares me and who I think a lot of people who are taking this seriously is they're not going in there with masks or gloves. The first protest, they were handing like treats out to kids with no masks, no gloves, as an assault on their rights versus like this is what we need to do to make sure that we like keep our fellow people safe as well as like give our healthcare workers a chance to catch up with the amount of cases that are coming in.
Yeah.